So in today's video, I'm sharing the secret to how to let go of resentments for good, because resentments are killers for a relationship because they create a lot of separation and hurt. But first, if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. So there's a saying that you might have heard: resentments are like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. We actually want that person to hurt because we're hurting. The problem is we're the ones feeling the pain. The other person has no idea because we haven't said anything. So when someone hurts us, there's basically two choices we have. We can either face it directly and talk to them, or we can keep those feelings to ourselves and harbor a resentment. Now, if the person is abusive or unsafe, then you're gonna need a third option, which is finding a different way to work through your hurt. That might take writing or talking to a friend or therapist and working it out privately. But most of the time when you're dealing with somebody who's hurt your feelings, it's as simple as making those two choices. You either talk to the person directly or you don't. And when you don't, they do tend to lead to resentment. But here's the thing, there's reasons why we hold on to resentments. And I'm gonna explain a few of them to you. Maybe you can relate. The first one is it's hard to face somebody and talk about the hurt. We don't know how the other person's going to respond. And if you come from a dysfunctional or rageful background, then it's really scary. So it's totally understandable to have some fear when talking to somebody else about hurt feelings. The other reason we tend to hold on to resentment is that we tend to catastrophize. We might think the worst, like, oh my gosh, if I bring this up, they're going to get really mad at me, or they're going to yell at me, or they're going to think I'm being too sensitive. So we assume the worst instead of giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. And most of the time, if we're in a relationship with somebody who really cares about us, they actually want us to speak up and take care of ourselves. The last reason you may be holding on to a resentment is that you're getting something out of it. It's called secondary gain. And this is where maybe you have a really sympathetic story to tell, or maybe you finally feel like you have a justifiable reason for your upset. And this is a big one when you come from a dysfunctional family and you didn't have your feelings honored. Getting that resentment may feel like something precious to you, like I finally have a reason to be upset and hurt. The other secondary gain is that it gives you energy. When I tell my resentment story, I get really heated. So before I get to the secret, you need to be able to do a few things. The pain has to get greater than the fear of doing something different. That's when most people change. When you finally get in enough pain and say, okay, you know what, I can't take this anymore, I have to do something different. The pain is great enough for you to risk doing something different. And that's typically the start of growth. So the next thing you need to do in order to let go of a resentment, and then I'm going to get to the secret, you need to write out the uncensored version of what happened. Because telling family and friends is one thing, but I want you to tell the uncensored version with all the private feelings, all the judgments, all the blame, because when you see it on paper, you're going to start to make some connections. You may realize that this hurt is so big that it's actually a trigger that relates to something painful in your past, or it's a pattern of hurt with the same person over and over again that's never been addressed. So the writing is really going to help you discover what's really the issue. Because sometimes when I've done this writing, I'll start off with the initial resentment of what happened, and it actually leads me to something 20 years in the past that I completely forgot about, but that's where my emotion is, and that's what I need to heal. So the writing is going to be a really important first step. So here's the secret for how to let go of resentments for good. You need to build empathy. This does not mean condoning the behavior or even wanting a relationship with the person. Healing a resentment starts when you can let go of the anger, and empathy is going to help you do that. You're going to be able to look at the other person in a neutral way, and that's what empathy does. Now there's two ways you can do this. The first way is to look at your part. What part did you play in this resentment? The actual hurtful behavior that someone else did, you probably didn't have any part of. But what did you do either before or in reaction to what happened? So for instance, if somebody said something hurtful to you, but you had just given a zinger of a comment that was hurtful, that may be what you did to contribute to it. Or maybe someone said something hurtful to you, and in reaction to that, you froze them out and you ghosted them and you said, you know what, I'm going to give them the cold shoulder. That also contributes to building that resentment because your actions played a part in that situation. So for instance, for me, I had a family member years ago where I really resented how she treated me, and I held on to it for years. until I realized that I was actually treating her poorly today, even though the behavior she did was 20 years ago. And when I realized that, I started correcting my behavior, and lo and behold, the resentment lessened. Because seeing my part helped shift the resentment I felt towards her. I could see that, you know what, she isn't this big bad wolf, because I actually contributed to treating her badly too. And what that did was that built empathy, and that's what helped me let go of the resentment. The second way you can build empathy is to put yourself in the other person's shoes and ask yourself, have you ever done anything similar to somebody else? Because oftentimes the answer to that is yes. If it's a no, then what I want you to do is ask a trusted friend for feedback. Recently, I had this happen where somebody was asking for a lot. They kept making these demands on me, and I was getting really resentful. So I called a friend of mine and said, you know, I don't really understand why they're doing this, and it's really making me mad. And she gave me a totally different point of view. She helped me understand that this person was financially responsible for many people. So her requests weren't just for her, they were for her entire family. And she felt the weight financially on her shoulders. I would have never figured that out by myself. And that's where, if you can find trusted family or friends to get feedback from, that's going to help you put yourself in their shoes. And that's what's going to build empathy. So again, the secret to letting go of resentment is to build empathy towards that other person, because that is how you're going to let go of the anger. Because the anger is actually poisoning you. The other person typically has no idea that we're hurting because we haven't said anything. Now, if you want a deep dive in healing your resentments, go check out my resentment journal, because that's going to include my 5-step process for you. Thanks so much.